They say Christmas is a time for miracles. But in a city as vast as New York, miracles aren't often found in the dazzling lights, but in the quietest of corners. This is the story of two such corners, a cold penthouse of loneliness and a warm corner of faith. And tonight, these two worlds are about to collide, all because of a gift nestled inside an old shoebox. It's amazing how stories can connect us from all around the world. Let me know where you're listening from in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe if you're ready for a mystery that will warm your heart. Their journey begins with simple, innocent faith, but they have no idea that their humble gift holds a secret so powerful it could bring a king to his knees. The city of New York glittered below, a constellation of lights that promised wonder, but delivered only noise. High above it all, in a penthouse of polished steel and glass, Henry Hank Grayson stood alone. The phone's shrill ring sliced through the silence, an intrusion he'd come to dread. He let it ring twice, 3 times, before lifting the receiver with a hand steady as stone. "Grayson," he said, his voice a low growl, clipped and final. On the other end, a woman's voice, bright with forced enthusiasm, spilled out. "Mr. Grayson, this is Eleanor from MoMA. We're planning an exhibition to honor your work. The Toy King, the genius behind an era of childhood joy. We'd love for you to—" "My legacy," he cut in, each word sharp as a blade, "isn't for display in glass cages. It's dead." The line went silent, the curator's breath catching before he hung up. The echo of his words lingered, heavy in the sterile air. Dead. He'd meant it, or so he told himself. Yet the lie gnawed at him, a splinter under skin. Hank crossed the room, his footsteps muted on the cold marble floor. The city's glow spilled through floor-to-ceiling windows, but it couldn't touch the shadows within him. He stopped at a panel in the wall, hidden behind a minimalist painting of nothing, a gray void like his heart. A press, a click, and the safe opened. No jewels, no stacks of cash, only a single item, a photograph, its edges yellowed, its surface worn from years of quiet reverence. In the image, a teenage Hank grinned, his arms slung around a smaller boy with the same dark eyes, the same unruly hair. Between them, they held a wooden toy, half-finished, its lines crude but brimming with promise. The brave captain, they'd called it, a soldier meant to carry a crystal heart. Hank's fingers traced the boy's face, his brother lost to a careless moment, a car accident that stole more than a life. It stole Hank's joy, his trust, his will to create. The betrayal by Marcus Vance, years later, the theft of their shared toy empire, was merely salt in a wound that had never healed. His gaze lingered, the ache rising like a tide. The city outside buzzed, oblivious, but here, in this tower of glass, time stood still. Hank didn't cry. He hadn't in years, but his chest tightened, a silent scream trapped within. He returned the photo to its vault, sealing it with the same finality he'd sealed his heart. Miles away in a corner of St. Jude's orphanage, a different kind of light flickered. Blankets draped over chairs formed a makeshift fort, a sanctuary for 3 small souls. Hannah, 8 years old, sat cross-legged, her sharp eyes scanning a tattered book as if it held the secrets to survival. Julian, also 8, sketched quietly in a corner, his pencil coaxing life from scraps of paper. Ruby, 6 and radiant, hummed softly, her fingers weaving a braid from an old shoelace. Their world was small, but it was theirs, warmed by the stubborn hope only children can muster. The fort's curtain parted, and Mrs. Gable stepped in, her silver hair catching the lamplight. She held a tablet, her expression a mix of exasperation and sadness. "You won't believe this," she said, settling onto a cushion with a sigh. "Hank Grayson, the Toy King himself, just turned down an exhibit at MoMA. They say he's become a shadow, locked away in that tower of his." Her voice softened, weaving a tale of a man who once crafted wonders, toys that sparked laughter in children across the world, but now hid from it all, his genius buried under grief. Hannah's brow furrowed, her practical mind turning over the story. Why would he say no? Doesn't he want people to remember him? Julian paused his sketching, his dark eyes thoughtful. "Maybe he's forgotten how to be happy," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Ruby, her face bright as a sunbeam, leaned forward. I saw a toy at the thrift shop last week. It was broken, but it looked like something he'd make. A soldier, all alone on a shelf. Mrs. Gable smiled, her eyes crinkling. That sounds like one of his. They say his toys had souls. Ruby's gaze sparkled, her small hands clasping together. What if we fixed it? What if we gave it to him? Maybe it could fix him too. Hannah scoffed lightly, but her skepticism wavered under Ruby's glow. Julian set his pencil down, nodding. It could be like giving him back a piece of his heart. The idea took root, fragile but fierce, in the warmth of their fort. They didn't know the weight of the toy they'd chosen, nor the man it would reach. But in that quiet corner, beneath blankets and dreams, a plan was born. Not just to gift a toy, but to mend a soul. The city hummed outside, its lights dazzling but cold. Yet here in this small sanctuary, a miracle was stirring, carried in the hands of 3 children and an old shoebox. The glow of Ruby's words lingered in the blanket fort at St. Jude's, a spark that refused to fade. Hannah, Julian, and Ruby sat in a tight circle, the thrift shop toy now a shared dream. The idea of fixing it for Henry, Hank Grayson, the Toy King, had taken hold, a quiet vow to mend more than wood. Outside, New York's winter winds howled, but within their sanctuary, the air hummed with purpose. Hannah, ever the pragmatist, broke the silence. We need that toy, but we've got no money. Julian's eyes, soft and steady, met hers. We've got enough if we pool it. Ruby nodded, her small hands already digging into a tin can where their meager savings, pennies and dimes scavenged from odd chores, rattled like hope. By morning, the trio trudged through snow-dusted streets to the thrift shop, a cluttered haven of forgotten things. The shop's bell jingled as they entered, the air thick with the scent of old books and worn leather. There, on a dusty shelf, sat the toy Ruby had seen, a wooden soldier, its paint chipped, one arm missing, its chest hollow. Its carved face held a faint, proud smile, as if it remembered better days. That's him, Ruby whispered, her voice reverent. The brave captain. Hannah counted their coins, barely enough, and handed them to the shopkeeper, who raised an eyebrow but said nothing. The soldier was theirs, cradled in Julian's hands as they hurried back to the orphanage, the city's chaos fading behind their mission. In the common room of St. Jude's, the children transformed a corner into their workshop. A single lamp cast a warm glow over a table littered with scraps, bits of string, a jar of paint, a twig from the orphanage yard. Hannah, her brow furrowed with focus, took charge. This is surgery, she declared, her voice steady but kind. She picked up the twig, its bark rough under her fingers, and began carving it with a borrowed pocket knife. Her hands, small but sure, shaped it into a new arm for the captain, each whittle a promise of protection. She fitted it to the soldier's shoulder, securing it with glue and twine, her movements precise, as if mending more than wood. He's strong now, she said, her skepticism softening into pride. Julian, quiet as ever, watched her work, his sketchbook open to a drawing of the captain. His imagination saw stories in broken things, and this toy was no exception. He dipped a brush into blue paint, his strokes careful as he added a tiny compass to the soldier's new hand. So he can find his way, he murmured, his voice barely audible over the crackle of the fireplace. The compass gleamed, a symbol of direction for a man they believed was lost. Julian's eyes flickered to the toy, then to his siblings. Mr. Grayson made things like this once. Maybe he'll remember how. His words hung in the air, a quiet faith that tethered their efforts to something greater. Ruby, the smallest but brightest, bounced on her knees, her energy a counterpoint to the room's stillness. She rummaged through her pocket and pulled out a smooth pebble, polished by time and touch. He needs a heart, she said, her voice clear as a bell. She opened the soldier's hollow chest, a cavity that seemed to ache for something lost. With care, she placed the pebble inside, its faint clink echoing like a heartbeat. So he won't feel empty anymore, she said, her smile radiant. She sealed the chest with a dab of glue, her small fingers trembling with the weight of her gift. The brave captain stood complete, its twig arm sturdy, its compass bright, its heart whole, a vessel of their hope. The children stepped back, their eyes fixed on the toy. It was no longer just a thrift shop relic. It was a story they'd woven together, each repair a thread of their care. Hannah's practicality had given it strength. Julian's artistry had given it purpose. Ruby's optimism had given it soul. They wrapped it carefully in brown paper, tucking it into an old shoebox, its edges worn but sturdy. "For Mr. Grayson," Ruby whispered, tying a string around it like a promise. As they worked, Mrs. Gable appeared at the doorway, her eyes softening at the sight. "You've brought that old soldier back to life," she said, her voice warm with pride. "But be careful. Hank Grayson's a hard man to reach." Hannah nodded, her jaw set, but Julian's gaze remained on the box. "He'll understand," he said, his quiet conviction unshaken. Ruby clapped her hands, her laughter a spark in the dim room. "It's Christmas, Mrs. Gable. Miracles happen at Christmas." The shoebox sat on the table, unassuming yet heavy with meaning. Outside, the city pulsed, its lights dazzling but cold. But here, in this small corner of St. Jude's, the children had crafted something more than a gift. They'd poured their hearts into a toy they believed could heal a king. And as they dreamed of delivering it, the world beyond their walls stirred, unaware that a rival's shadow was already creeping closer, ready to challenge their fragile hope. The shoebox sat on the table in St. Jude's common room, its brown paper wrapping tied with string, a humble vessel for the brave captain and the hopes of Hannah, Julian, and Ruby. The children's laughter from their workshop lingered in the air, but outside, New York's winter sky darkened, as if sensing a shadow creeping closer. The city's pulse carried whispers of a different kind, rumors that would test the trio's fragile faith. In a gleaming office tower across Manhattan, Marcus Vance, CEO of VTech Toys, leaned back in his leather chair, a smirk curling his lips as he scrolled through news of Hank Grayson's latest refusal. The Toy King's rejection of MoMA's exhibit was a gift, a crack in the armor of a man Marcus had long envied and betrayed. Marcus's office was a shrine to his ambition, glass shelves lined with sleek, mass-produced toys, each a hollow echo of the creations he'd stolen from Hank years ago. The betrayal had been simple, a shared idea, a whispered promise, then a knife in the back when Marcus patented their breakthrough toy and built an empire on it. Hank's retreat into solitude had only sweetened the victory. Now, with Hank's name fading into obscurity, Marcus saw a chance to cement his own legend. He tapped a pen against his desk, the rhythm sharp and calculated, like the moves of a chess master. A press conference, he decided, would do nicely, a spectacle to paint him as the true heir to the toy world's throne. By noon, Marcus stood before a sea of cameras in a brightly lit conference room, his tailored suit pristine, his smile practiced. VTech Toys is proud to donate $1 million to children's charities, he announced, his voice smooth as polished glass. This gift is inspired by an old friend, a man who lost his way, but once dreamed of bringing joy to children everywhere. The words were a velvet dagger, veiled just enough to avoid naming Hank, yet sharp enough to cut. Reporters scribbled furiously, captivated by the narrative. Marcus, the generous visionary, rising above the ashes of a fallen rival. The story spread like wildfire, igniting screens across the city, including the small television in St. Jude's common room. Hannah, Julian, and Ruby sat cross-legged on the floor, the shoebox resting between them like a sacred relic. The TV flickered to life as Mrs. Gable adjusted the antenna, her expression curious but wary. Marcus's face filled the screen, his words dripping with false sincerity. "He's talking about Mr. Grayson," Hannah said, her voice tight with suspicion. Her practical mind dissected his speech, sensing the lie beneath the charm. "He's making himself look good by making Mr. Grayson sound broken." Julian's pencil paused over his sketchbook, where he'd been tracing the brave captain's compass. "Why would he do that?" he asked, his quiet voice laced with unease. Ruby, clutching the shoelace she'd been braiding, frowned. "That's not fair. Mr. Grayson's not bad. He just needs his heart back." Mrs. Gable sighed, settling into a chair with the weight of years. "Marcus Vance was Hank's friend once," she said, her tone heavy with the sadness of old stories. "They built toys together, but Marcus took what wasn't his. Now he's rewriting the past to shine brighter." Her words hung in the air, a warning wrapped in wisdom. Hannah's eyes narrowed, her protective instincts flaring. If he's lying, why should we trust him? Maybe he's the one who doesn't deserve our gift. Julian shook his head, his fingers brushing the shoebox. Mr. Grayson made the captain. It belongs to him. We can't let lies stop us. Ruby nodded, her small face fierce. We're giving it to Mr. Grayson because he needs it, like a Christmas star to light his way. The children's resolve hardened, their voices blending into a quiet pact. They didn't fully understand Marcus's game, but they felt its chill, a shadow cast over their mission. Hannah folded her arms, her skepticism battling her hope. Julian's gaze lingered on the shoebox, his faith in the toy's power unshaken. Ruby hummed softly, her optimism a beacon in the dim room. They would not waver, not yet. The brave captain, with his twig arm, painted compass, and pebble heart, was more than a gift. It was their answer to the world's cynicism, a small but stubborn light against Marcus's carefully spun darkness. Outside, the city churned, its lights flickering under a sky heavy with snow. Marcus's press conference played on loop, his image plastered across billboards and screens, a false king claiming a stolen crown. But in the warmth of St. Jude's, the children held fast to their plan. The shoebox, unassuming yet heavy with meaning, waited for its journey. As they whispered their next steps, how to reach Hank's tower, how to slip past his walls, their voices carried a quiet defiance. The world might believe Marcus's lies, but Hannah, Julian, and Ruby believed in something stronger. A toy, a heart, a miracle waiting to unfold. The whispers of Marcus Vance's press conference lingered in the air of St. Jude's common room, his polished image still flickering on the television screen. Hannah, Julian, and Ruby sat around the shoebox, its string-tied wrapping a silent testament to their resolve. The brave captain, restored with a twig arm, a painted compass, and a pebble heart, waited inside, a fragile hope against the shadow of Marcus's lies. Hannah's sharp eyes darted to the TV, where Marcus's smile gleamed, his words painting him as a savior while casting Hank Grayson as a relic of failure. Her small hands clenched, her practical mind wrestling with doubt. He's everywhere, she muttered, her voice tight. Maybe we're wrong about Mr. Grayson. Julian, his sketchbook open to a half-finished drawing of the captain, looked up, his quiet gaze steady. We're not wrong, he said softly, his fingers brushing the shoebox as if it held more than wood. Ruby, her braids bouncing, hugged her knees, her voice bright but fierce. Mr. Grayson needs the captain. Marcus doesn't. He's got everything already. The room felt smaller, the weight of their mission pressing against the warmth of their corner. Mrs. Gable, lingering by the doorway, watched them with a knowing sadness, her silence giving them space to grapple with their choice. Hannah stood, pacing the worn rug, her skepticism a shield she'd honed in a world that offered little trust. Look at Marcus, she said, pointing at the screen. He's giving money to kids like us. He's out there smiling while Mr. Grayson hides. What if we're wasting our gift on someone who doesn't care? Her words cut, not from cruelty, but from fear. Fear of being wrong, of leading her siblings into disappointment. She glanced at the shoebox, its simplicity stark against Marcus's grand gestures. Julian set his pencil down, his voice barely above a whisper. The captain's his. I saw a picture of Mr. Grayson in an old magazine, holding a toy just like it. He looked happy then, like he's lost something we can give back. Ruby hopped to her feet, her optimism a spark in the dim light. He's not bad, Hannah. He's just sad, like when I lost my favorite ribbon, but you found it for me. She touched the shoebox, her small fingers tracing the string. We made the captain strong again. We can make Mr. Grayson strong too. Hannah's shoulders tensed, her mind caught between Ruby's faith and the world's harsh lessons. She wanted to protect them, to shield Julian's quiet dreams and Ruby's boundless light. But Marcus's image loomed, a siren call of certainty in a plan that felt like chasing shadows. Mrs. Gable stepped forward, her voice gentle but firm. You're right to question, Hannah. The world's full of masks, but sometimes the ones who hide the most need the most help. She knelt beside them, her eyes meeting Hannah's. "You've put your hearts into that toy. Trust them." Hannah's gaze softened, her doubt wavering under the weight of her siblings' belief. Julian flipped open his sketchbook, revealing a drawing of the brave captain, its compass glowing under his careful lines. "This is for him," he said, his voice steady now. "Not Marcus. Mr. Grayson made things that made kids like us happy. He's just forgotten how." The room stilled, the television's hum fading as Hannah looked at her siblings. Julian's quiet faith, Ruby's unyielding hope. They were anchors, pulling her back from the edge of doubt. She knelt beside the shoebox, her fingers brushing its rough surface. "Okay," she said at last, her voice softer but resolute. "We'll find him. We'll give him the captain." Ruby clapped, her laughter a burst of sunlight, and Julian's lips curved into a rare smile. They began to plan, their voices overlapping, how to reach Hank's tower, how to slip past its gates, how to carry their gift to a man who'd shut out the world. The shoebox sat at the center of their circle, a small but stubborn light against the darkness Marcus had cast. Outside, New York streets buzzed, its lights flickering under a sky heavy with the promise of snow. Marcus's face still flashed across screens, his lies weaving a narrative that threatened to drown Hank's truth. But in this corner of St. Jude's, the children held fast to their mission. They didn't know the full weight of the toy they carried, nor the man it would reach, but they believed in its power. As they huddled together, plotting their journey to Hank's penthouse, their whispers rose like a quiet rebellion, a vow to prove that a simple gift could outshine a rival's shadow and light the way to a king's lost heart. The snow fell thicker now, cloaking New York's streets in a hush that seemed to carry the weight of the children's mission. Hannah, Julian, and Ruby clutched the shoebox, its string-tied wrapping damp from the flurry, as they stood before the towering glass facade of Henry Hank Grayson's building. The brave captain rested inside, its twig arm, painted compass, and pebble heart a quiet defiance against the doubts that had tested their faith. Hannah's breath clouded in the cold, her practical mind calculating their odds. "He won't see us," she murmured, eyeing the doorman's stern silhouette. Julian's fingers tightened around the box, his quiet resolve unshaken. "He has to." Ruby, her cheeks flushed with hope, tugged at Hannah's sleeve. "It's Christmas. Miracles happen." The doorman, a broad man with a face carved from years of routine, blocked their path. "No visitors," he said, his voice flat, echoing Hank's standing orders. The children stood small against the building's grandeur, their worn coats and scuffed shoes out of place in its polished world. Hannah stepped forward, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "We have a gift for Mr. Grayson. It's important." The doorman's eyes flicked to the shoebox, his expression softening for a moment before hardening again. "He doesn't take gifts. Go home, kids." Ruby's lip quivered, but Julian's gaze held firm, the box a shield against rejection. High above, in the sterile expanse of his penthouse, Hank sat before a wall of screens, the security feed flickering with the children's image. He leaned closer, his jaw tight, his instinct to dismiss them as another intrusion. The world had long since stopped mattering. Marcus's betrayal, his brother's loss, had carved a hollow where his heart once beat. Yet something about the box in the boy's hands snagged his attention. He zoomed in, the grainy image sharpening to reveal a familiar shape. A wooden soldier, crude and repaired, but unmistakable. The brave captain. His breath caught, a memory stirring, the laughter of his brother, the warmth of their shared dreams. The toy they'd never finished. His hand hovered over the intercom, reason warring with a pull he couldn't name. "Tell me about the box," Hank's voice crackled through the doorman's radio, sharp but unsteady. The doorman blinked, startled, and turned to the children. "What's in it?" Hannah squared her shoulders, sensing a crack in the wall. "It's a toy we fixed for Mr. Grayson. It's his from a long time ago." The doorman relayed her words and the line went silent. Seconds stretched, the snow falling heavier, each flake a heartbeat in the quiet. Then, impossibly, Hank's voice returned. "Let them up." The elevator ride was a blur, the mirrored walls reflecting three small faces lit with nervous hope. Hannah clutched the shoebox, her skepticism giving way to a flicker of belief. Julian's eyes traced the floor numbers, his artist's heart sensing a story unfolding. Ruby hummed softly, her optimism a melody against the hum of the ascent. The doors opened to a penthouse that felt more like a tomb, cold, vast, its glass windows framing a city that seemed a world away. Hank stood at the far end, his silhouette sharp against the skyline, his face unreadable. "Why are you here?" he asked, his voice low, a shield against the vulnerability creeping into his chest. Hannah stepped forward, the shoebox extended like an offering. "We found this. It's yours. We fixed it." Her words were simple, but they carried the weight of their journey, the coins they'd saved, the hours they'd spent, the faith they'd defended. Julian's voice followed, soft but clear. "It's the brave captain. We made it strong again." Ruby's smile broke through, bright as dawn. "It has a heart now, so you won't feel empty." Hank's eyes locked on the box, his hands trembling as he took it. The string felt fragile under his fingers, the paper worn but warm, as if it held more than wood. He didn't open it. Not yet. The weight of the box was enough, a tether to a past he'd buried. The children stood before him, their small forms a stark contrast to the emptiness of his world. He wanted to send them away, to retreat back into his fortress, but the toy's shape burned in his mind, a ghost he couldn't ignore. "You don't know what you've done," he said, his voice barely a whisper, thick with something unspoken. Hannah met his gaze, unafraid. "We know it's yours. That's enough." The penthouse seemed to shrink, the distance between them narrowing as Hank held the box. Outside, the snow fell, softening the city's edges. But here, a different kind of softening was beginning. The children's gift, small and unassuming, had breached his walls. And though Hank didn't yet understand its full weight, he felt its pull, a promise of healing, a crack in the armor he'd worn too long. As they stood together, the shoebox a bridge between their worlds, the moment held its breath, waiting for the truth to unfold. The penthouse air was heavy, the silence between Henry Hank Grayson and the three children, Hannah, Julian, and Ruby, charged with an unspoken weight. The shoebox rested in Hank's hands, its worn paper and knotted string, a fragile bridge between his cold world and their warm hope. The brave captain lay inside, its presence a ghost from a past he'd buried. Hannah stood firm, her practical gaze steady despite the vastness of the glass-walled room. Julian's quiet eyes held a flicker of faith, while Ruby's smile, bright as ever, seemed to soften the stark edges of the space. Hank's fingers trembled, the box a lifeline he wasn't ready to grasp. "You don't know what you've done," he'd said, his voice a whisper, raw with something he couldn't name. He set the box on a sleek table, its simplicity jarring against the penthouse's sterile luxury. The children watched, their breaths shallow as Hank's hands hesitated over the string. Outside, New York's snow fell in silent curtains, shrouding the city in a hush that mirrored the moment. He untied the knot, the paper crinkling under his touch, and lifted the lid. There, nestled in a bed of tissue, was the brave captain, its wooden form weathered but whole, its twig arm sturdy, its painted compass gleaming, a faint clink betraying the pebble within. Hank's breath hitched, his eyes tracing every detail, each one a needle threading through the scars of his heart. The toy wasn't just a relic, it was a memory made flesh. He saw his brother's face, younger, laughing as they carved the soldier in their father's workshop, their hands clumsy but full of dreams. The arm had broken during a playful tussle, their giggles echoing until the day a car accident stole that laughter forever. The chest, left hollow, was meant for a crystal heart they'd never found, a promise unfulfilled, like Hank's own life after Marcus's betrayal. But these children, strangers with nothing to gain, had finished what he and his brother could not. The twig arm spoke of strength, the compass of direction, the pebble of a heart restored. Hank's fingers brushed the twig, its roughness grounding him. "How did you know?" he asked, his voice cracking, not expecting an answer. Hannah stepped closer, her voice steady but soft. "We didn't. We just thought it looked like it belonged to you." Julian's quiet gaze met Hank's, his words careful. "I saw a picture of you with a toy like this. You looked happy. Ruby, unable to contain herself, bounced forward. "We put a heart in it so you wouldn't feel empty anymore." Her words, so simple, struck like a bell, clear and resonant, shattering the walls Hank had built. He lifted the captain, turning it in his hands. The pebble rattled softly, a heartbeat in the silence. He closed his eyes and the years fell away. Marcus's theft, the Empire's collapse, the grief that had chained him to this tower. But deeper still was his brother, the boy who'd believed in him, who'd dreamed with him. The children's gift wasn't just a toy, it was absolution, a chance to forgive himself for surviving, for failing, for hiding. Tears welled, unbidden, and spilled down his cheeks, hot against the cold of his skin. He sank to his knees, clutching the captain, his shoulders shaking as he wept. Not just for his brother, but for the man he'd been, the man he could still be. The children stood frozen, their small forms silhouetted against the city's glow. Hannah's practicality wavered, her eyes wide with something like awe. Julian's hand twitched as if to reach out, his artist's heart sensing the story unfolding. Ruby, ever the light, knelt beside Hank, her small hand resting on his arm. "It's okay," she whispered, her voice a balm. "The captain's home now." Hank's sobs slowed, his grip on the toy loosening as he looked at them. Really looked, for the first time. These children, with their worn coats and boundless faith, had given him more than a gift. They'd given him a mirror, reflecting a truth he'd forgotten, that love could mend what loss had broken. He rose slowly, the captain still in his hands, his voice hoarse but steady. "You don't know what this means," he said, meeting their eyes, "but I'll show you." The penthouse, once a tomb, felt alive now, its cold edges softened by their presence. The snow outside fell thicker, blanketing the city in quiet promise. Hank didn't yet know how he'd move forward, but the toy in his hands and the children before him were a start, a spark to reignite a legacy long buried. As they stood together, the shoebox empty but the moment full, the path to redemption began to take shape. Its light faint but growing, ready to shine beyond these walls. The penthouse, once a fortress of solitude, hummed with a new warmth as the dawn's light filtered through its glass walls. Henry Hank Grayson sat at his table, the brave captain before him, its twig arm, painted compass, and pebble heart glowing in the soft glow. Hannah, Julian, and Ruby sat nearby, their small forms a quiet anchor in the space that had held only ghosts. Hank's tears had dried, but his eyes still carried the weight of the night before. The moment the children's gift had cracked open his heart, revealing not just grief but possibility. "You don't know what this means," he'd told them, his voice raw but resolute. "But I'll show you." Those words, spoken in the heat of revelation, now demanded action, a path forward from the ashes of his past. Hank rose, the captain in his hands, and faced the children. "This toy," he said, his voice steady now, "wasn't just mine. It was my brother's too. We made it together before—" He faltered, the memory of the accident a shadow that lingered but no longer consumed. "You finished it. You gave it back to me." Hannah's practical gaze softened, her hands folded tightly as if to hold on to the moment. Julian's eyes, ever quiet, traced the toy, his artist's heart sensing its story. Ruby, her smile a beacon, nodded. "We knew it was special," she said, her voice bright with certainty. The city beyond the windows stirred, its pulse indifferent to the transformation within. Hank set the captain down, his mind racing. Marcus Vance's lies still echoed across New York, painting him as a savior while Hank remained a shadow. But vengeance, once a fire in his chest, felt hollow now. The children's gift had shifted something deeper, a legacy not of wealth or rivalry, but of joy, the kind he and his brother had once chased. He turned to them, a decision forming. "I'm not going to fight Marcus," he said, surprising himself with the clarity of it. "I'm going to build something new, for you, for kids like you." By mid-morning, Hank's penthouse buzzed with purpose. He called his old team, designers, engineers, dreamers he'd pushed away in his years of isolation. They gathered in a conference room below, their skepticism melting as Hank spoke, his voice alive with a passion they hadn't heard in years. "We're launching the Grayson and Brother Creativity Fund," he announced, the brave captain on the table before them, a contest for kids to design toys, and a new Brave Captain 2.0, with every cent of profit building playgrounds for children who need them. He held up the toy, its repairs a testament to possibility. This was born from love. It's time it spread love. The announcement hit the city like a spark. Newsrooms, still buzzing with Marcus's charity stunt, turned their cameras to Hank. He stood before a modest crowd, the children at his side, their worn coats a stark contrast to his tailored suit. Hannah stood tall, her practicality anchoring the moment. Julian's quiet presence radiated pride, his sketchbook tucked under his arm. Ruby beamed, her hand slipping into Hank's, a gesture that steadied him. "This isn't about me," he told the crowd, his voice clear. "It's about what we can create together, for every child who dreams, who builds, who believes." The cameras flashed, but Hank's eyes were on the children, their gift the heart of his words. Across town, Marcus watched the broadcast, his smirk fading. His carefully crafted image wavered, but Hank didn't care. This wasn't a battle to be won, it was a legacy to be shared. The children's gift had shown him that. Its twig arm a reminder of resilience, its compass a guide to purpose, its pebble a heartbeat of hope. As the crowd dispersed, Hank knelt before the trio. "You did this," he said, his voice low but fierce. "You reminded me who I am." Hannah's lips twitched into a rare smile. Julian nodded, his eyes bright. Ruby hugged him, her laughter a melody that filled the room. The day faded into evening, the city's lights twinkling below. Hank and the children sat in the penthouse, sketching ideas for the new captain. Julian's pencil danced, drawing a soldier with a brighter compass. Hannah suggested sturdy joints, her practicality shaping their dream. Ruby proposed a tiny heart-shaped locket. So every kid knows they're enough. Their voices wove together, a tapestry of hope that drowned out the echoes of Hank's past. The brave captain, once a relic of loss, now stood as a beacon of what could be. A legacy not of wealth, but of love, creativity, and second chances. Outside, the snow settled, softening the city's edges. The world beyond these walls was already shifting, the Grayson and brother fun a ripple that would grow. Hank looked at the children, their faces lit by the glow of their shared vision. He wasn't just the toy king anymore. He was a man reborn, his heart mended by their gift. As they planned, laughed, and dreamed, the path to a new home, a family began to form, its foundations laid in this moment of light. A year had passed since the spark of the Grayson and Brother Creativity Fund ignited New York, and St. Jude's Orphanage was no longer the quiet corner it once was. Its walls, once worn and gray, now bloomed with color, murals of stars and ships painted by children's hands, their laughter echoing through halls transformed into a vibrant art center. The brave captain, born anew from the gift of Hannah, Julian, and Ruby, had carried Henry Hank Grayson from the shadows of his penthouse to this place of light. The planning sessions of that winter evening, when the children's sketches and dreams had filled his heart, had grown into something greater, a legacy of love, not loss. Now, as Christmas lights twinkled through the orphanage's windows, Hank stood among them, no longer the toy king, but a man who had found home. The workshop at St. Jude's buzzed with life, its tables cluttered with broken toys sent from children across the city. Hank, his sleeves rolled up, worked alongside Hannah, Julian, and Ruby, their faces lit by the glow of their shared purpose. Hannah, her practical hands steady, sanded a wooden car, her once skeptical eyes now bright with pride. Julian, his sketchbook ever present, painted a doll's face, his quiet artistry breathing life into forgotten things. Ruby, her braids swinging, glued a wing onto a toy bird, her laughter a melody that wove through the room. They were no longer just orphans, they were Hank's family, their bond sealed by a court's decree in a year of shared dreams. Hank paused, his gaze settling on a small glass case in the corner. Inside rested the original brave captain, its twig arm, painted compass, and pebble heart untouched since that night in the penthouse. Beside it stood the photograph of Hank and his brother, their young faces frozen in a moment of joy. The sight no longer pierced him with grief. Instead, it warmed him, a reminder of the love that had shaped him and the love that had saved him. He looked at the children, their hands busy with repairs, and felt a quiet certainty. The captain wasn't just a toy, it was a bridge between past and present, between loss and healing, between a man and the family he'd found. The city outside sparkled under a fresh blanket of snow, its lights softer now, as if in reverence to the season. News of the Grayson and Brother Fund had spread far beyond New York, with playgrounds rising in neighborhoods where children once had only pavement to dream on. The Brave Captain 2.0, its design inspired by the children's additions, a sturdy arm, a bright compass, a locket heart, had become a symbol of hope, its profits building spaces where creativity could thrive. Hank no longer watched the news for Marcus Vance's lies. They had faded, irrelevant against the truth he'd reclaimed. The world saw him now not as a shadow, but as a man who built joy from broken things. Hannah glanced up, catching Hank's eye. "This one's done," she said, holding up the car, its wheels spinning smoothly. Her smile, rare and hard-won, mirrored the strength she'd given the captain's arm. Julian set his brush down, his doll complete, its eyes gleaming with a story only he could see. "They'll love it," he said softly, his faith as quiet and steady as ever. Ruby, finishing her bird, clapped her hands. "It's going to fly to someone who needs it." Her optimism, once a spark, now lit the entire room. Hank knelt beside them, his voice warm. "You're right. Every toy we fix carries a piece of us." They worked into the evening, the workshop a haven of clinking tools and soft chatter. Children from the orphanage joined them, their small hands learning to mend, to create, to dream. Mrs. Gable, her silver hair catching the Christmas lights, watched from the doorway, her eyes crinkling with pride. "You've turned this place into a miracle," she said, her voice thick with emotion. Hank smiled, a true smile, unburdened by the past. "They did," he said, nodding at Hannah, Julian, and Ruby. "They showed me the way." As the night deepened, the workshop grew quiet, the children's laughter settling into a contented hum. Hank sat with his family, the brave captain's case glowing softly in the corner. He thought of his brother, of the dreams they'd shared, and of the dreams he now built with these children. The penthouse was no longer his home. This was here, among broken toys and mending hearts. The snow fell outside, blanketing the city in peace, and Hank felt it too, a peace that came from knowing he'd found his place, his purpose, his family. The brave captain was home, and so was he. As the snow settles over New York and the brave captain finds his home, we're left with a simple truth. Even the smallest gifts can mend the deepest wounds. Hannah, Julian, Ruby, and Hank remind us that miracles bloom in quiet corners, where compassion and hope meet. What did their story stir in you? Perhaps it's a memory of a gift that changed you, or a dream you're ready to rebuild. Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear how this tale touched your heart. Thank you for joining me on this journey through a Christmas of second chances. Until our next story, may you find your own light in the season's glow. See you soon.